You wake up to the biting chill of dawn seeping through cracks in the ancient stone walls, the cold immediately sinking into your weary bones. Another morning in your dimly lit cell, another reminder of the burden that rests upon your tired shoulders. The rough wool blanket scratches your skin, and as you rise, your body protests with dull aches that echo yesterday's toil and torment. You shuffle slowly to your small window, barely wide enough for a hand to pass through, barred with rusting iron. Through the narrow opening, pale light illuminates the dismal room, outlining the sparse furniture and your few worldly possessions: a worn wooden crucifix, a bowl of stagnant water, and a battered prayer book whose pages have grown yellow and stiff with age and frequent use. Carefully, methodically, you wash your face in the cold, murky water. The chill sends needles dancing across your skin, making you shudder, but the discomfort is no worse than anything else your day has in store. Your rough, calloused hands move automatically, working through the ritual purification, a pointless attempt to cleanse yourself from the sins you've witnessed, sins you've judged, sins you may yourself have committed, even if only in the darkest corners of your heart. Breakfast awaits, though your stomach twists uncomfortably at the thought. You tear off a piece of yesterday's stale bread, hard as stone and dotted with dark specks that you suspect might be mold. Hunger overrides caution. Your teeth grind painfully against the bread, sending sharp jolts of pain through your jaw. The bitter taste lingers unpleasantly on your tongue. You chase it down with a gulp of sour, watered down wine, which does little to relieve the ache in your throat. Breakfast finished, you kneel beside your austere bed and begin your morning prayers. Words you have repeated thousands of times pour from your lips, monotonous and practiced, stripped long ago of passion or meaning. They blend together into an endless litany of guilt, penitence, and resignation. The cold stone floor bites into your knees, the discomfort somehow comforting in its familiarity. The prayers offer no solace. You remember your mentor's words clearly. A true inquisitor finds peace only in duty. Yet, peace is something you've long stopped expecting. You've witnessed too much pain, too much suffering. The world's endless cruelty has hollowed out any hope you might have once held. You rise stiffly, wincing at the cracking sound your knees make. The dawn light is stronger now, revealing the full extent of your cell's squalor. Patches of moss grow along the edges of the stones, and a small pool of dampness has gathered in one corner, seeping slowly from an unseen crack above. The dampness never dries, perpetually nurturing an unpleasant smell of mold, decay, and something else, something you've long ceased to notice consciously. Perhaps it's the scent of human despair. Slowly you put on your robes, a heavy garment made of coarse wool dyed black. The fabric scratches against your skin relentlessly, a constant irritant that reminds you of the mortification you willingly bear. Over this, you drape a dark cloak, tattered and patched from years of wear, each patch representing yet another day of toil and hardship. The embroidered cross on your breast, silver thread long tarnished, no longer inspires reverence, only fear among those who glimpse it. Now, fully dressed, You retrieve your official instruments from the cabinet near the door. The keys jingle in your hand, iron teeth worn dull with years of use, capable of locking away not just prisoners, but whole lifetimes. Beside them rests your ledger, a thick book filled with accusations, testimonies, and verdicts. Its weight, heavy in your hands, seems to represent more than just ink and paper. It embodies your responsibility, your guilt, and perhaps your eternal judgment. Before leaving the room, you pause at the cracked mirror nailed crudely to the wall. The glass reflects your haggard face, eyes sunken, rimmed with dark circles from nights spent sleepless in contemplation or haunted by nightmares. Lines have etched themselves deep into your forehead, each wrinkle testament to countless interrogations, trials, and judgments past. Your reflection is that of a man feared and hated in equal measure, respected by few and loved by none. Once, long ago, you might have sought admiration or gratitude. Now, you accept that loneliness and isolation are your constant companions. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, it creaks loudly, echoing down the corridor lined with identical cells. You step outside into the passageway, inhaling the familiar smell, damp stone mingling with the scent of burning incense drifting from the chapel. In the distance, muffled chanting begins, monotonous and solemn. You join the procession of weary monks moving silently down the hall, their hooded heads bowed low, eyes fixed on the floor. Together, you enter the chapel where the candles flicker feebly, barely illuminating the oppressive gloom. You take your usual seat near the back, away from those who still cling to a desperate, naive faith. As the priest's voice drones on, recounting familiar sermons about sin, hellfire, and eternal torment, you find your mind drifting despite your best efforts. How many of these listeners truly believe? How many secretly harbor doubts or resentment, cursing you silently behind their masks of devotion? You shake off these thoughts, forcing your mind back to the sermon's stern warnings. After all, doubt is dangerous, perhaps even deadly, for someone in your position. Yet each word seems to bounce harmlessly from the walls, echoing emptily. You have heard it all before, preached it yourself more times than you care to recall. When the service ends, you rise wearily with the others. Outside, the sun struggles upward into a gray, unwelcoming sky. Clouds gather ominously on the horizon, promising a day filled with drizzle and dampness. The air feels heavy, carrying with it the sour odors of waste and refuse from the town below. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, mentally steeling yourself against the day ahead. Soon, you must descend into the streets, those filthy, crowded thoroughfares where poverty and suffering walk hand in hand, and where your arrival is met not with relief, but with dread. Another day of suspicion, accusation, and judgment lies ahead, a cycle repeated endlessly, with only the faces changing, and sometimes not even those. This is your morning, Inquisitor, a monotonous, bitter start to another endless, grimly repetitive day in your service to faith, justice, or perhaps merely to human misery itself. And so, You step out from the sanctuary, descending slowly toward the city streets, readying yourself once again to meet the faces of a humanity whose greatest crime may simply be that it lives, breathes, and struggles against its fate in a world that remains forever unforgiving. You step from the relative quiet of the monastery courtyard onto the grimy, refuse strewn streets below. Immediately, the scent of decay assaults your senses, overpowering even your practiced resilience. Filth collects in stagnant puddles along uneven cobblestones, a mixture of human waste, rotting food, and mysterious substances you no longer wish to identify. Each step requires vigilance. One misstep, and your worn leather boots sink deep into something foul and viscous. People notice your presence instantly, eyes widening in alarm, faces suddenly pale. Conversations cease abruptly as townsfolk duck away into alleyways, doorways, or simply avert their eyes in feigned reverence. Your reputation precedes you, cloaking you in an aura of menace. To them, you represent judgment, punishment, and the cruel hand of religious authority, someone to avoid at any cost. You pause momentarily by the corner of a rickety old tavern, the structure sagging dangerously toward the street, as if weary of supporting its own weight. A drunkard sprawls near its doorstep, snoring loudly, mouth agape in drunken stupor. Flies buzz lazily around his dirt smeared face, but no passerby spares him even a glance. Compassion, it seems, is too costly a luxury for these weary souls who struggle daily merely to survive. Across the muddy lane, a group of ragged children dig through a mound of rubbish, seeking anything edible or valuable. Their thin fingers sift through the rotting refuse, competing with rats nearly their size. Hunger is their constant companion, desperation, their only education. They barely glance up at you, though you can see fear quickly replacing curiosity when one notices your robes and whispers urgently to the others. In seconds, the children scatter like frightened sparrows into the maze of narrow alleys and hidden doorways. You move on, stepping carefully over discarded fish bones and bits of moldy bread crust, and turn onto another narrow street. Here, the stench of human despair intensifies, mixed with the acrid tang of smoke and soot rising from crumbling chimneys. It is an impoverished quarter, filled with dilapidated homes leaning precariously against one another, roofs leaking badly, and walls patched crudely with scraps of wood or cloth. The sight is drearily familiar, echoing hundreds of other towns you've traversed in your thankless duties. A woman sits hunched by her doorstep, feverishly scrubbing clothing in a bucket filled with filthy water. Her hands, red and raw from endless washing, tremble slightly as you pass. You observe silently as she mutters a quick prayer, perhaps begging for your gaze not to linger. You've witnessed such reactions countless times before. You are the emissary of suspicion, the Inquisitor, whose mere glance can summon misery upon even the innocent. Guilt and innocence have long ceased to be clearly definable terms in your world. Further along, a blacksmith pounds rhythmically on glowing metal, sparks flying dangerously close to his soot streaked face. His muscles ripple beneath his tattered, sweat stained tunic, his expression hard, focused solely on survival. Yet even he pauses briefly when he spots you, the hammer hovering uncertainly above his anvil. You sense his brief inner turmoil. Should he greet you respectfully, avert his eyes in humility, or simply pretend you don't exist? Wisely, he returns swiftly to his labor, hammer blows ringing louder and more urgently than before, as if each strike could drown out your presence. Nearby, a sickly beggar sits propped against a crumbling wall, legs twisted and malformed, eyes clouded by blindness. He shakes a battered tin cup with an almost mechanical rhythm, his cracked lips whispering prayers that go unanswered. Passers-by hurry past without acknowledging his existence. In a town as poor as this, charity is limited and pity is worthless currency. You toss a small coin into his cup, not from compassion, but from a sense of weary obligation. Perhaps this insignificant act will grant your tormented soul brief respite from its daily burden, though you doubt it. As you continue your journey, the market square opens before you, a place where life pulses more vigorously, but no less desperately. Merchants shout hoarse warnings about the freshness of their dubious wares. Fish with glazed eyes and sunken bellies, vegetables wilted and blackening at their edges, meat buzzing with flies. Yet the townsfolk buy eagerly, hunger silencing caution. You watch a woman examine a basket of questionable eggs, sniffing each suspiciously before making her choice, knowing she gambles with the risk of illness. Beside her, a man bargains aggressively for stale bread loaves, shouting angrily at the baker, who, in turn, curses loudly. It is commerce conducted under duress, with neither joy nor dignity, merely the necessity of survival. Suddenly, a child darts past you, clutching a stolen apple, chased by a furious vendor. The boy's gaunt face, streaked with dirt and tears, fills briefly with panic as he nearly collides with your robes. You step back instinctively, allowing him passage, though he clearly expects punishment from your hand. The vendor pauses at your side, hesitant, unsure whether pursuit or obeisance takes priority in your imposing presence. You dismiss him silently with a tired wave. Justice, you remind yourself bitterly, is selective and arbitrary, especially in these miserable streets. Near the market's edge, you encounter the town crier, his voice cracked and weary, proclaiming yet another harsh decree from your order, a warning against heresy and witchcraft. The gathered crowd listens apathetically, long accustomed to empty threats and warnings. Yet their expressions change quickly as you move among them, masks of indifference replaced by fearful respect. Mothers clutch their children tighter, fathers avert their eyes, and young men tense instinctively, as if poised for flight. The irony isn't lost on you. Their reactions, fear mingled with hatred, mirror your own feelings toward this place. Yet you persist, duty bound to walk among them, always suspicious, always judging, forever trapped between your conscience and obligation. You turn once more, now toward the poorer quarters. Here, poverty deepens into squalor, misery hardens into indifference. A filthy stream trickles through a gutter at the street's edge, thickened by refuse and excrement, its foul stench saturating the air. Flies swarm aggressively, claiming the street as their kingdom. Children play heedlessly in this filth, barefoot and oblivious, unaware or uncaring of the diseases that lurk beneath their feet. A cart loaded with bodies from the night's plague victims rattles by, its driver's face wrapped in cloth against infection, his eyes both hollow and hopeless. The sight barely raises eyebrows here. Death is commonplace, too familiar to warrant grief or horror. Life in this town is measured not by hope or joy, but by sheer stubbornness, the desperate, futile effort to survive one more miserable day. At last, you approached the decrepit building housing your interrogation chamber, a place feared by all. You pause, steeling yourself against the sights and sounds soon to confront you, pleas for mercy, screams of agony, sobs of despair. It's an all too familiar script, one you've performed 1,000 times, your role painfully predictable, monotonously cruel. You glance back once at the street, taking in its despairing inhabitants, trapped forever between hunger and fear. Then, with resignation, you step into the dim confines of your chamber, closing the door firmly behind you. Another day has truly begun. Inside the interrogation chamber, darkness reigns, punctuated only by the pale flickering of candles struggling against the oppressive gloom. Shadows dance unevenly across damp, mold stained walls, painting grim patterns that seem to mock your weariness. The air is thick and stagnant, a suffocating mix of sweat, smoke, and something intangible, fear itself. In the center of the room, restrained to a wooden chair stained dark by time and suffering, sits your latest accused. A young man, hardly more than 20 years old, yet his haggard face and sunken eyes speak of a life already spent beyond his years. His tattered clothes cling loosely to his emaciated frame, and his wrists, bruised and raw from struggling, tremble weakly against iron shackles. You sigh slightly, stepping closer. The floorboards creak ominously beneath your measured tread, each sound punctuating the heavy silence. The prisoner flinches visibly at your approach, eyes widening with dread, breath quickening. He knows your reputation. They always do. Your assistant, a gaunt figure named Brother Thomas, stands silently to the side, waiting dutifully for your instructions. His expression remains impassive, unreadable beneath the shadows of his hood. It occurs to you that he, like yourself, has long ago grown numb to the horrors this chamber holds. The routine of cruelty dulls all sensibilities in time, reducing morality to a distant whisper, easily ignored. You open the heavy ledger placed on a nearby table, running your finger over pages filled with meticulous handwriting, the record of accusations and confessions, each page heavy with human suffering. Your voice, dry and monotonous from years of rehearsed questioning, fills the room as you address the trembling prisoner. You are accused of heresy, you announce flatly. The words feel hollow, drained of meaning through endless repetition. Witnesses have reported your rejection of church teachings, your mocking of the Holy Scripture, and your attempt to spread forbidden beliefs, among others. The accused shakes his head vigorously, desperate denial already forming on his cracked lips. No, Your Holiness, please. I am innocent. I swear it by all the saints. I attend Mass. I follow the teachings. You allow him to plead, unmoved, expression unchanged. Such desperate claims of innocence no longer surprise or sway you. You've heard them countless times before, always uttered with the same frantic sincerity, the same anguished pleas. Innocence or guilt scarcely matters now. Confession alone justifies your presence, your very purpose within these walls. Patiently, almost mechanically, you begin your methodical interrogation. Your questions, carefully crafted and repeated relentlessly, probe for inconsistencies, tiny slips of the tongue, signs of hidden defiance or secret doubts. Each hesitant response, each flicker of hesitation or confusion strengthens your suspicion. It becomes less about discovering truth and more about extracting admission. After all, truth, you've learned bitterly, is merely another casualty in your grim routine. Soon, words alone prove insufficient. You gesture silently to Brother Thomas, who moves without hesitation, gathering tools from a table at the chamber's far end. His movements are precise, practiced, entirely devoid of hesitation or humanity. In moments, he places instruments, rusty pincers, iron chains, and a branding iron in plain view of the accused. The young man's eyes widen in terror as realization dawns. He trembles violently, perspiration streaming down his pale face, mingling with tears now escaping silently down his cheeks. Mercy, Your Holiness, he begs brokenly. I beg your mercy. I've done nothing wrong. Please believe me. Yet your face remains impassive, unmoved by cries that echo endlessly in memory and dreams alike. Compassion has long since deserted you. It died slowly, piece by piece, with each accusation, confession, and punishment delivered by your own weary hands. Your conscience struggles feebly against your practiced indifference, but experience whispers persistently that mercy can have no place here. Mercy would mean weakness, and weakness is unforgivable. At your nod, Brother Thomas begins his grim work, tightening iron shackles around wrists and ankles until flesh bruises and swells grotesquely. The prisoner screams, a raw, desperate sound that reverberates off damp stone walls, piercing your ears and echoing relentlessly in your mind. You wince internally, but reveal nothing outwardly. You've learned well how to conceal even the faintest flicker of emotion. Each scream fades eventually into breathless sobs. Each sob dissolves into mumbled prayers or incoherent pleas for forgiveness, for mercy, for release from this torment. Yet still you continue, relentless in your methodical pursuit of confession. You observe silently, meticulously noting each twitch, each weakening protest, each faltering denial, calculating precisely when to pause, when to press harder, when finally to stop. Finally, exhausted physically and mentally, the prisoner whispers brokenly, barely audible, "Yes, yes, I confess, forgive me." He says these words not from guilt, but from desperation. They always confess in the end, willing to admit anything, even crimes unimagined, if only to end their pain. You note his confession mechanically in your ledger, another entry among many, each one a small piece of your own eroding humanity. Very well, you respond coldly, closing the ledger with finality. The sound echoes harshly in the room, signaling the end of today's interrogation. Brother Thomas moves silently, releasing the prisoner's restraints. The young man collapses weakly to the floor, sobbing openly now, his frail body shaking uncontrollably. You turn away, unable or unwilling to meet his anguished gaze. Instead, you focus on your hands, which tremble slightly despite your efforts at composure. The bloodless ritual of torture no longer disturbs you, but it does drain you, leaving behind a dull emptiness, an ache impossible to soothe. How many times have you stood here, feeling nothing but exhaustion, numbness, and an ever deepening sense of futility? Brother Thomas quietly escorts the prisoner out, leaving you alone in the oppressive silence of the interrogation chamber. The candles flicker weakly, nearly extinguished, plunging you into shadowy gloom. You remain standing, motionless, consumed by thoughts you'd rather avoid, questions about justice, morality, and your own complicity in humanity's suffering. Briefly, memories surface, images of past interrogations, countless faces contorted in pain and desperation, voices begging vainly for mercy. You wonder fleetingly if any true heretics have actually crossed your path, or if your duty has merely been a cruel charade, a cynical theater of suffering performed solely to maintain control through fear. But such thoughts, you remind yourself sternly, are dangerous. Doubt breeds weakness, and weakness, once admitted, could shatter your carefully maintained facade of authority. Duty alone provides justification for your actions, and yet duty itself is becoming an increasingly hollow word. You gather yourself with effort, shaking off these troubling reflections. Soon, you must appear again before the townspeople, publicly announcing today's judgment. You straighten your robes, feeling their scratchy fabric scraping against your skin, another uncomfortable reminder of your role and the weight it imposes. Finally, you step from the chamber into the harsh light of day, closing the heavy door firmly behind you, trapping its memories and misery within. Your steps echo slowly down the corridor, leading you inevitably toward another painful public spectacle, a familiar script you repeat endlessly, trapped in a cycle of cruelty and resignation. Outside, waiting anxiously, the crowd gathers, eager for the judgment about to be pronounced. Their anticipation fills you with bitter weariness, for you know tomorrow will bring another prisoner, another interrogation, another broken confession. And so it continues, your endless duty, grim, repetitive, and mercilessly but inescapable. You emerge from the interrogation chambers into the harsh daylight, squinting momentarily as your eyes adjust to the blinding glare. The world outside feels unbearably bright after the suffocating gloom within, yet it brings no warmth or comfort, only a cold clarity illuminating the grim task awaiting you. The streets are already alive with townsfolk, eager for the spectacle they know is imminent. Your presence confirms their expectations, transforming their murmurs of anticipation into tense silence. Slowly, deliberately, you begin your procession toward the town's central square. Around you gather monks, guards, and curious townspeople, forming a somber parade that grows steadily with each passing step. The silence gradually gives way again to hushed whispers and muted gossip, expressions alternating between fearful awe and morbid curiosity. They follow, drawn inexorably by the grim fascination of justice enacted publicly, a ritualized cruelty intended as both punishment and warning. The square, a broad, muddy expanse, usually reserved for weekly markets and petty commerce, now holds a more sinister stage at its center, a raised wooden platform, stark and foreboding. Upon it stand two executioners, hooded and silent, their figures massive and forbidding against the pale, overcast sky. The platform's very existence is a chilling reminder to the gathered crowd of the thin boundary separating them from the condemned. Your footsteps echo dully across the makeshift wooden stairs as you climb slowly onto the platform. Your heartbeat quickens momentarily, not from fear or excitement, but from sheer, exhausted resignation. You've presided over countless executions, each more draining than the last, yet never easier. The repetition dulls your senses, but not your conscience. The accused is led forward moments later, legs trembling beneath him, eyes wide with animal terror. He has become almost unrecognizable from the man who first faced you, thin, pale, and beaten down, bearing physical and emotional scars inflicted by your own orders. He casts a desperate glance toward the gathered townspeople, perhaps searching hopelessly for compassion or mercy among their cold, indifferent faces. He finds none. You raise your voice to address the assembled crowd, words echoing with practiced authority across the silent square. Good people, today you witness the judgment of this man, convicted by his own confession of crimes against God and church. He has spread lies, defied the holy teachings, and attempted to corrupt the souls of the innocent. Your voice is monotone, emotionless, yet it carries clearly over the hushed crowd. You know your role perfectly. You've repeated this speech more times than memory cares to recall. Yet each repetition feels emptier, a hollow ritual stripped entirely of moral justification. Justice, as practiced here, seems increasingly indistinguishable from vengeance or public amusement. The prisoner cries out suddenly, interrupting your speech, pleading frantically for mercy one last time. Please, I confessed only to end the torment. I'm innocent. I swear it before God and heaven. Have mercy. His desperate appeal is met with cold silence. Faces in the crowd remain stony, unmoved. They have seen this play too many times before, heard identical pleas from countless others. They are numb, indifferent, not out of cruelty, but because survival demands emotional detachment. Mercy would force them to confront the horror of their complicity. Better to remain safely distant, secure in collective denial. You pause briefly, allowing the prisoner's pleas to fade unanswered into oppressive silence. No mercy arrives. The executioners glance toward you, awaiting the inevitable signal. You give it with a single, slow nod, another action practiced countless times before, now almost mechanical. The condemned man is seized firmly, dragged roughly toward the waiting stake at the platform's edge. He resists feebly, strength long since drained by torture and despair. Still, instinct compels him to fight against his fate, kicking and screaming vainly as he is bound securely to the wooden post. Dry kindling and straw are piled meticulously around his feet, a task performed with grim efficiency by assistants who've learned to shield their consciences behind obedience. You stand silently, your gaze fixed deliberately upon a distant point beyond the scene unfolding below. You have long ceased to watch the execution itself, preferring to detach yourself emotionally from the violence enacted in your name. Yet your imagination refuses to grant respite. Though your eyes remain averted, your mind vividly supplies the images, every scream, every flicker of pain and terror across the condemned man's face. The executioners set the pyre alight with practiced ease, the flames leaping swiftly upward, greedily devouring kindling and straw. Soon, acrid smoke rises thickly, curling and billowing into the sky. The prisoner's cries pierce sharply through the crackling flames, desperate, anguished screams that echo hauntingly through the stillness of the square. Townspeople watch impassively, their expressions carefully controlled, though many flinch involuntarily, betraying suppressed horror. You too suppress emotion behind a carefully maintained mask of indifference. Yet beneath this facade, guilt gnaws ceaselessly, an ever present ache impossible to silence or ignore. Each execution you preside over diminishes you further, carving deeper wounds into your battered conscience. Yet escape remains impossible, trapped as you are by duty, authority, and expectation. Slowly the cries subside into silence. Flames consume flesh, smoke obscures the platform, and eventually, mercifully, it ends. The square empties gradually, townspeople drifting silently away, returning quietly to their bleak, repetitive lives. They will discuss today's spectacle only in whispers, voices tinged with fearful reverence, careful never to openly question or condemn it. You remain alone upon the platform, staring bleakly at the smoldering remnants below. Ash and charred bones linger amid dying embers, a grim testament to human cruelty dressed in righteous authority. You wonder briefly how many more such scenes your soul can endure before finally shattering beneath the relentless strain. Brother Thomas approaches quietly, his footsteps muffled by the damp, muddy ground. He regards you silently for a long moment before speaking softly, carefully. "It is done, Your Holiness." You nod slowly, expressionless. "Yes, brother, for today." He hesitates briefly, clearly sensing your internal struggle, yet trained by years of obedience never to question openly. Instead, he bows respectfully and withdraws silently, leaving you alone once more to wrestle privately with your tormented conscience. Evening approaches slowly, bringing chill air and lengthening shadows to the empty square. You descend at last from the execution platform, each step weighted with profound exhaustion. You walk slowly toward your solitary quarters, your mind heavy with memories of today's cruelty and dread for tomorrow's inevitable repetition. Another day has ended, a grimly familiar spectacle performed for the indifferent amusement of townsfolk trapped forever in lives of misery, fear, and monotony. Yet no relief comes from completion, only the cold certainty that tomorrow will bring another prisoner, another execution, another painful ritual repeated endlessly. As darkness falls completely, enveloping you in oppressive gloom, you finally reach the cold, lonely comfort of your room. Here, behind closed doors, you collapse onto your rough bed, exhausted beyond physical weariness. Sleep will offer no peace, only nightmares echoing today's horrors and memories of past executions you've presided over, each face burned indelibly into your memory. This is your reality, a cycle of cruelty, guilt, and restless despair enacted publicly in a world indifferent to suffering, a reality from which escape remains forever impossible, a fate to endure night after night, execution after execution, until your own soul finally breaks beneath the weight of relentless sorrow. You close the heavy wooden door behind you, the echo of its creaking hinges resonating like a final judgment against the lingering daylight outside. Once again, you find yourself imprisoned within the oppressive solitude of your dim, stone cell, a sanctuary without comfort, a refuge offering no peace. Evening has come, yet the weight of today's grim spectacle clings stubbornly to your conscience, refusing to relinquish its grip. Your cell remains exactly as you left it this morning, damp, cold, and oppressively empty. A single candle sputters feebly in the corner, casting elongated shadows onto walls slick with moisture. You remove your heavy outer robe, feeling immediate relief from its coarse fabric, yet sensing no true freedom in the gesture. Beneath the robes, your simple garments cling to your body, dampened by sweat, smoke, and the invisible residue of human despair. Slowly, methodically, you wash your hands and face again in the bowl of stagnant water. Ritual purification, meaningless yet compulsive. The water, cold and murky, offers no cleansing beyond the superficial. The stains you bear run deeper than skin, etched permanently into the fabric of your soul. You kneel beside your narrow bed, attempting prayer once more. The familiar words come haltingly now, syllables blending indistinctly into hollow echoes that hold no comfort or conviction. Each word feels heavier, emptier than before, a litany of ritual repeated endlessly, yet stripped of meaning by repetition and despair. Your faith, once vibrant and unquestioned, now stands battered and eroded by years of cruelty, doubt, and internal conflict. Despite your exhaustion, sleep refuses to come quickly. You lie awake on your hard, straw filled mattress, the rough fabric scratching irritably against your skin, each movement provoking fresh discomfort. Eyes open, you stare blankly upward at the cracked, mold streaked ceiling, tracing patterns in its imperfections. Your mind wanders restlessly through memories of today's events, the prisoner's pleas, his tortured screams, the flames engulfing his frail body, all replaying vividly, endlessly behind your eyes. You turn restlessly onto your side, trying unsuccessfully to banish these troubling images. Yet memories refuse dismissal, intruding relentlessly upon consciousness. You wonder bitterly how long this torment can persist, this ceaseless confrontation with your own complicity in human suffering. Even behind closed eyelids, faces stare accusingly, silently condemning your role in their misery. Finally, unable to bear stillness any longer, you rise once more from your bed. Your joints ache painfully, each movement a sharp reminder of the weariness accumulated through years of duty and relentless moral compromise. You pace slowly, deliberately, around the confines of your tiny room, hoping movement might distract or exhaust you into sleep. But the cell provides no escape, only endless repetition of steps already traced countless nights before. You pause briefly by your window, gazing outward into the oppressive darkness beyond. The town below is quiet now, the day's turmoil temporarily silenced beneath the uneasy slumber of its inhabitants. A few flickering lights punctuate the gloom, illuminating faint outlines of buildings and alleys familiar in their decay and desperation. Yet, even in darkness, the town retains its aura of misery, a community bound together less by mutual compassion than shared fear and suffering. You wonder briefly whether anyone in this place sleeps soundly tonight, untroubled by dreams of poverty, disease, or persecution. Do they too lie awake, haunted by guilt, regret, or unanswered prayers? Or is their exhaustion deeper, more complete, a surrender to life's relentless brutality that leaves little room for reflection or conscience? Your gaze drifts upward toward the sky, now shrouded thickly by clouds that obscure moon and stars alike. Darkness feels absolute tonight, oppressive in its depth and impenetrability. Once, long ago, you might have found solace in the vastness above, comforted by faith that divine judgment balanced human cruelty. Now, however, the heavens seem merely indifferent observers, distant and unresponsive, leaving humanity to suffer alone beneath their silent gaze. Turning away from the window, you retrieve your battered prayer book, its pages brittle, worn thin by frequent, desperate handling. You flip aimlessly through familiar passages, each verse memorized yet drained entirely of comfort. Instead of solace, each line provokes further questions about justice, mercy, and your own troubled role within this brutal machinery of punishment. Suddenly, you find yourself confronted again by memories of countless prisoners you've condemned, men, women, even children, each judgment etched indelibly into your consciousness. How many were truly guilty, you wonder bitterly, and how many merely victims sacrificed to satisfy fear or maintain authority? Have you served justice or merely perpetuated cruelty behind a mask of righteousness? These questions torment you endlessly, unresolved despite years spent desperately searching scripture, prayer, and personal reflection. You recall vividly the anguish etched onto each accused face, their desperation and confusion mirrored now in your own troubled conscience. Perhaps you realize bitterly their suffering has become yours, transferred through chains of complicity, linking prisoner, executioner, and judge alike. Exhausted, you set aside the prayer book, recognizing its inability to quiet your restless conscience. Instead, you sit heavily upon the edge of your bed, burying your head within trembling hands. You have become a prisoner yourself, trapped in cycles of duty, cruelty, and guilt from which escape seems impossible. Faith, once your strongest ally, now stands distant, uncertain, offering neither guidance nor consolation. Time passes slowly, each moment measured by persistent drips of water seeping through walls, an endless rhythm that matches your own relentless heartbeat. Gradually, darkness begins to pale slightly beyond your window, signaling the inevitable approach of dawn. Another day looms menacingly, promising repetition of tasks already performed endlessly, monotonously. Eventually, weariness overwhelms even guilt, dragging you reluctantly toward unconsciousness. Yet sleep, when it finally arrives, offers no sanctuary, only vivid, merciless dreams replaying today's horrors in excruciating detail. You relive each interrogation, each execution, helplessly witnessing your complicity repeated endlessly in nightmare after nightmare. You awaken suddenly, drenched in cold sweat, heart pounding violently against your chest. Dawn now fully illuminates your cell, revealing clearly its familiar squalor. Despite exhaustion, relief at waking escapes you entirely. Instead, realization sinks heavily. Another sleepless night has passed, bringing only temporary reprieve from your torment. Slowly, painfully, you rise once more to face the coming day. You wash again mechanically, perform prayers without conviction, and dress silently in robes whose fabric feels heavier with each passing morning. Outside your door waits duty, repetition, cruelty, all familiar companions whose presence grows steadily more oppressive. Pausing briefly before exiting, you glance once more at your reflection in the cracked mirror, a face hollowed by fatigue, eyes dulled by internal suffering. You recognize yourself less clearly each day, identity consumed slowly by relentless guilt and despair. Yet escape remains impossible. Duty demands obedience, authority demands compliance, and your conscience offers only ceaseless accusation. You open the door reluctantly, stepping outward again into corridors already filled with echoes of suffering soon to be inflicted anew. And thus, another day begins, grimly familiar, oppressively repetitive, and mercilessly inescapable.